Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunday worship at the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. My name is Kate, and I'm delighted to be your worship associate this morning. Whether you're taking part in this worship celebration from your home or wherever else you may be, whenever you may log on, you are welcome here. We acknowledge that our FirstU campus is located on traditional, unsurrendered, and unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and that the work of reconciliation is a responsibility of our congregation and of all Canadians. Our goal is to educate ourselves and all who have ears to hear, to be of service to those who are at risk, and to advocate for justice. Do take care and take advantage of online opportunities at FirstU to stay in touch during this protracted pandemic. If you are new to FirstU and would like to learn more about us, please contact us through our email at welcome@firstunitarianottawa.ca. Following our service, please join us as well for our hospitality hour. And here is Brent Nicole from our board with announcements for today. Over to you, Brent.
Thank you, Kate. I have 3 announcements from the board and 2 from the Environmental Action Group. First off, some exciting news. The church building will be reopening for Sunday services, for children's RE, and for congregational meetings at 50% capacity starting in March. Next week, you can come to Sunday service at the church building. Please take note. In addition to masking, all adults must now provide proof of triple vaccination. You must have your booster shot upon entry to attend services or meetings on site. The COVID task force made these recommendations and welcomes your comments and your questions, comments, and feedback by email at covid@firstunitarianottawa.ca. Secondly, we would like to populate the FirstU photo directory with your names and your faces to make it easier for new members to get to know you. The photo directory is self-managed, but you can get help by emailing photodirectory@firstunitarianottawa.ca or find out more in the EUU. Thirdly, there is an upcoming vacancy on the board of directors as of May 1st, our AGM, our annual general meeting. The nominating committee is seeking congregants interested in filling this vacancy. You can contact the chair of the nominating committee, Joe Connor, for more details. His phone number and email address are available in the member directory and in the EUU. Finally, here are 2 important time-limited advocacies from our Environmental Action Group linked to plastic waste. First, globally, the United Nations Environmental Assembly meets in Nairobi from February 28th to March 2nd, that's this week. Call on world leaders to negotiate the first legally binding global agreement that regulates plastic pollution over its full life from extraction to disposal. Second, in Canada, the draft ban on single-use plastics is a positive step, but it must go further and be implemented sooner. Public comment is invited upon until March 4th. The links for these advocacies are in the EUU, where you can find out more on the food waste advocacy. You can find out more about food waste advocacy on the climate action page of our website. Thank you. Back to you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Brent. During the continuing pandemic, we encourage you to sign up to receive the EUU, our weekly email newsletter. Check our Facebook and Instagram pages and our webpage for notices and updates. Our calendar continues to be as full as ever, albeit much of it online. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, and however you identify, today, you are a part of our spiritual community.
Kate, Jen, Brent, thank you. Bonjour, mes amis. Good morning, one and all. We are here together virtually, but still together. And as Brent just said, next week we'll be together in person and also online once more. I am the Reverend Eric Meter, the community's lead pastor. This morning we light our chalice to these words by Orlando Brugnola. Flame, friend of our most ancient ancestors, we kindle you now to make you visible in this time, yet in truth you burn always, in the unique worth of each person, in the imagination, in the turning of the heart to sorrow or joy, in the call to hope and in the call to justice. Burn bright before us, burn bright within us. Our chalice is lit, and now this morning's opening hymn, Come Thou Font of Every Blessing.
Come thou font of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come thou font of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun, when we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou font of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways, lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O font of justice, earth before us, heaven above.
Thank you, Jen. Our call to worship this morning is adapted from words by Teresa Soto. Some people are used to keeping rules. Don't cross the street when the light is red. Only sensible. Yet it turns out that keeping rules isn't the same as keeping covenant, which asks us instead of keeping a bright line to keep our promises. To what then have we promised ourselves? To this moment in time and place, to this community, and even tenderly interconnected this planet. We promise ourselves to the idea that we are each and all human beings. We promise that there is something moving between us that we cannot tame and cannot measure. Our chalice is a reminder that what flame we keep inside cannot light the way. The light must spill to shine. The thing you must be is yourself, unadulterated, shedding the willingness to journey alone, as though you were made of something hard and unforgivable. You are human. You belong right here, right now. And together, we will chase away the sickness, the secrets, and leave only the open possibility that the future is a space for growth. Come, let us worship together.
I'm Reverend Ellen Bell. I am the spiritual care visitor for this congregation. At this point in the service, we accept people's personal joys and sorrows, and we recognize these by placing pebbles in water and allowing the ripples to carry the messages out through the universe where they may be congratulated or commiserated. There's one personal message this morning, and that is for Paula, who is recovering from surgery. The next one is a much more global wish, and that is for the situation, the attack by Russia onto Ukraine. It is a terrible business, but I heard this morning that there are peace talks as a possibility, so I'm going to add an extra stone, hoping that cooler minds will prevail. And there will be one last stone for all the joys and sorrows kept in our hearts. We will now have a moment of silence.
Hi to everyone. Hope everyone is doing well on this Sunday. Today I'm reading to you a short story titled Ordinary Mary's Extraordinary Deed. Ordinary Mary was so very ordinary that you'd never guess she could change the world. This ordinary kid, she did. She changed the world. One ordinary day, skipping on her way from her ordinary school to her ordinary house, she passed an ordinary vacant lot filled with ordinary bushes, growing ordinary berries, ordinary blue and juicy, luscious, lovely berries. Well, ordinary Mary picked the ordinary berries and brought them in a big brown bowl to Miss Bishop's porch. What? Left berries in a big brown bowl on Miss Bishop's porch? That sneaky kid, she did. This made Miss Bishop very, very happy. So she baked a big batch of blueberry muffins and thought of 5 people who might have brought who might have brought those beautiful berries, then secretly gave each a plate. How great! 5 people got a plate. One of those 5 was her paper boy, Billy Parker. And when Billy saw his name on a note in the driveway on a plate, he quickly parked his bike and ate every crumb. Oh, yum, yum, yum. He ate every crumb. This made him so glad that the next 5 people got their papers on the porch and not in the bushes where he often threw them. In fact, they were handed right to them. One of those was Mr. Stevens, who was so amazed that he smiled for 10 hours on the airplane, then said to 5 different people who had heavy bags, "Here, let me help you." He still smiled and they did too. One of those 5 was Maria, whose cranky little boy James stopped crying when Mr. Stevens played peekaboo with him until their ride came. When he waved goodbye, Maria exclaimed, "How strange that a stranger would be so sweet." And the next day, when she was out shopping, once, twice, 5 times, she did something nice for 5 different people, 5 times without stopping. One of those 5 was Joseph, old and bent and gray, in front of her in line at the produce stand. When he said, "I guess I counted wrong. I don't really need these oranges," little James reached out to him with an orange from their basket, and Maria put a coin in Joseph's hand and said, "Here, take this. The oranges are on us." As Joseph shuffled to the bus, his heart was full and his eyes were wet, and his hands did helpful things for the next 5 people he met. One of those 5 was Sarah, a college girl who was off to see the world and stopped at Joseph's shop. When her bag broke and her things fell all over the floor, she said, "Oh, what will I do?" Joseph said, "This is for you." And he gave her a new bag woven with his own hands in red and purple and green. "Oh, thank you," she said. "It's the loveliest bag I've ever seen." When Sarah left, she felt sunny as noon, and she just had to shine on 5 people soon. One of those 5 was Sophia, whom she met on a boat, looking like the world might end, looking like someone without a friend. "What beautiful blue eyes you have," Sarah said, "and they're just the color of the flowers in your lovely dress." "Yes," said Sophia. "Oh, yes," said Sarah. The beautiful blue eyes shed a happy tear, and when the boat trip was through, Sophia called 5 people to make them happy too. One of those 5 was Tom, her son, the doctor who was having a very hard day. "Hi," she said. "I love you, Tom." "Well, how great to hear your voice," he sighed. "I always need my mom." Dr. Tom was so cheered up that on his next break, he bought a big bunch of bright balloons for 5 young patients, and he handed them out right then and there. One of those 5 was Peter, a little boy who went home from the hospital that very day. Gratitude for the big bunch of bright balloons filled him and thrilled him and spilled out of him and onto the next 5 people who came his way. One of those 5 was Eric, a teenage boy whose sacks and such were way too much. When one dropped on the sidewalk, Peter stopped his play and rushed right over, saying, "Super wheels to the rescue." Well, Eric, no longer stressed, was very impressed and made a mental note that very afternoon to help 5 people and to do it soon. One of those 5 was Dee, his 10-year-old sister, who didn't have many friends and was painfully shy. When Eric said, "Hey sis, want to come to the park and learn how to ride my skateboard?" she looked at him wide-eyed. "Serious?" she cried. "Sure," he said. Because of her brother, Dee decided maybe she could be a friend to another 5 others. One of those 5 was Louise, a homeless woman who lived under the trees. She could hardly believe her ears when she heard Dee say, "May my brother and I buy you a hot dog and a drink at that stand over there?" Could it be true? Someone actually cared enough to give her food and a smiley face ring that was practically new. Louise was so pleased that she decided that even though she had nothing, she would find 5 others and give them something. One of those 5 was Mr. Taylor, who had lost his wallet in the park. Louise found it full of 5s and 10s and 20s. Oh, what could she do with all that money? But she found his name and called his home, and over he came. He was so impressed that she was honest in spite of being poor that he offered her a job in his store and vowed to do something generous for 5 people or more. One of those 5 was Kate, a woman on vacation who wanted to see a show she'd heard was a sensation. "Oh no," she said, "it's sold out, but I'm going home tomorrow," and her face filled with sorrow. Mr. Taylor held out his ticket. "I live here," he said. "I can go any time. Take mine." Kate loved the show and was so touched that she thought buying 5 presents for 5 people back home would be really fun. One of those 5 presents was a little heart necklace for Mary, her niece, and you should have seen her eyes light up in surprise. Mary, what? Ordinary Mary? Yes, ordinary Mary's extraordinary deed had come full circle, and on its way it had changed the lives of every single person. You see, when Miss Bishop made muffins from Mary's blueberries, not only the paper boy, Billy Parker, but the other 4 people too made 5 people smile, and those 5 did too. And after a while, in only 15 days, love was sent to every person everywhere. Just see how it went. Well, 7 billion is even more than all of the people on the planet. So after everyone had a share and everybody knew that somebody cared, there was even love left over. The world was changed, and thousands and millions and billions agreed it was all because one ordinary day, ordinary Mary did a perfectly ordinary, stunningly earth-shaking, totally extraordinary deed. The end. I hope everyone has a really great Sunday. Please check the EU for RE updates.
Well, I have the reading. The reading is from Marge Piercy's poem, The Low Road. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen makes a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say, we, and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more.
Thank you, Kate. This morning I had planned on talking to you about the proper role communities of faith such as ours play in the wider world. In short, I was going to talk on the work of the church. And I suppose that is still my topic this morning, though the wider context for what I had planned on discussing has changed radically in the last few days. I'm talking, of course, about Russian President Putin's invasion of Ukraine. During the last few days, it feels that I've lived my life in front of the news screen. I do not recommend this as a spiritual practice. While it's important to be educated citizens of the world, the result of screenitis, I have found, is mired confusion, fear, outrage, and overall dispiritment. It may not be a word, but I trust you know what I mean. Of course, there is always so much beyond our sphere of influence than within it. Yet, as the story now shared with us earlier about ordinary Mary rightly reminds us, each of us can impact the lives of countless others for the better. So this morning, my goal is to talk with you about the impact we can have on one another and beyond our chosen community. While I've never been to Ukraine or Russia, I've known many from Russia and the Baltic states. I visited Hungary and Romania 3 times, and my late sister-in-law was Croatian. Yes, the world really is a very small place. And then there was the time I was mistaken for a Russian. It was in early August of 2001. I was on my way to Bucharest, Romania, after 2 days in Hungary's capital, Budapest. In Bucharest, I would join other Unitarian ministers from North America. For 2 weeks, we would travel across the Romanian region of Transylvania, meeting with and getting to know our Hungarian-speaking Unitarian colleagues there. This tour was informally known as the Lelke Pastor Tour, or Young Ministers Tour. The tour remains, those 2 weeks, a highlight of both my career and my life. Taking the train between Budapest and Bucharest, I was set to meet up with another tour member, Cecilia Kingman, in the Transylvanian city of Kolozsvár, really the center point of Unitarian Transylvania. Kolozsvár is the Hungarian name of that city. On most maps today, it is listed as under its Romanian name, Cluj-Napoca. There in Kolozsvár, we would board a train that would take us to Bucharest. Cecilia and I arrived in the Romanian capital late that night, and there was just one problem at the train station in Bucharest. The legal taxi stand was a long way around the corner from where the main exit of the train station was. To get to it, we would have to pass through two areas where illegal taxis congregated on those needing a ride. Now, several years before, I had taken a less than legal taxi out of JFK in New York and ended up paying dearly for it. Story for another day. So this was not an experience I wanted to repeat. Cecilia and I elbowed and shouldered our way through the first group of swarming taxi drivers, but then the second group looked so much larger. Look, we need a plan for this, Cecilia said. Your shoes look like they could be German. We'll pretend to be bossy German tourists. When we get near these next taxi drivers, we do a quick 3 count and then shout no in German. Nein. Okay. But what came out of my mouth at the count of 3 wasn't the German word for no. It was the Russian word for no. I shouted, "Niet!" The swarming taxi drivers scattered like leaves in the wind. I had never wielded such verbal power before in my life, nor since, truth be told. I had spoken in Russian, the language of the nation that supported Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu until he was overthrown and slain on Christmas Day, 1989. History is rarely kind and has become especially unkind to despots. While I look back at my momentary career as a Russian impersonator with a grin, that grin is followed by a grimace. The Unitarians in Transylvania were persecuted under Ceausescu's regime and remain bullied this day by Romanian nationalists. Moving a bit closer to the news of today, it's helpful to remember that in 1994, the United States, Russia, under then Russian President Boris Yeltsin, and Britain declared in the Budapest Memorandum to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine and refrain from the threat or use of force against Ukraine. And with those assurances, at that time, Ukraine gave up its 1,900 strategic nuclear warheads. My guess is that the Budapest Memorandum will go down in history as another well-intentioned treaty, well-intentioned document that ended up signifying nothing. Another in that category would be the US Treaty of Tripoli, a document I had never heard of until the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. In Article 11 of that treaty from 1796, the United States declares that it is not founded on the Christian religion. Good luck getting wide agreement on that in the States today. But I'm afraid I digress again. Today, democracy is under sustained, multifaceted attack across the globe. We religious liberals who feel that each and every authentic voice deserves to be heard, listened to, have our work cut out for us to counter the claims of despots who think their way is the only legitimate, reasonable way forward. More than ever, I am convinced that we need to be careful not to let ourselves be sidetracked or drawn into fake fights. We have to keep our eyes on the prize, as the old saying goes. We need to keep our vision aimed ahead of us and not let ourselves be diverted by the squabbles that will do little but erode our sense of unity and drain energy for what most needs to be addressed. Now, this is clearly easier said than done. While I expect there will always be more than enough work at hand, if we are to be successful, we will need to keep our energies focused. No community of faith can do everything, but each one can do anything it devotes ourselves to. That said, FirstU Ottawa is a bit more ambitious than your run-of-the-mill congregation. Best civic fare in the city, check. Long-standing support for immigrants, check. Showing up for environmental and indigenous rights demonstrations, check. You get the idea. Ours is a community of overachievers. And like all overachievers I know, this community, you, us, we, desire to do everything and do it well. Yet, I have learned that no single person, no single community can do everything. In communities of faith, we have to choose where to put our energies. Some of it, that energy, will always be inward, for there is organization and always maintenance work to do. But for the rest of it, well, magic has been known to happen. There are what we set out for and our stated goals, and then there are things that happen organically because the spirit of the community moves toward fuller expressions of love. When I was in my early teens, my family moved from a solidly working class town to a suburb where all my classmates seemed to have parents who were doctors or lawyers. My brother when I started high school, my brother went to middle school in an even more affluent enclave. On the first day of school there, he came home in tears. The kids in his classes had bore into him because he wore, Parrish thought, terrible thought, Sears tough-skin jeans, not Lee's or Levi's, as was their custom. Go back to school tomorrow with your head held high, our parents told him. Don't give in to bullies. The second day, he came home in tears again. After dinner, Dad went and took him to the mall to get him some Levi's. I am my brother's older brother, yet I couldn't protect him and wouldn't have known how, even if I might have been able to. I couldn't fight that battle for him, but I could project my resentment onto the people at my family's church, so many doctors and lawyers and business consultants. In my teens, while I loved my youth group there and our adult advisors, Tim and Claudette, I came to see the church as a whole more as a social club than as a faith community. Then, after my first year of college, when I returned for the summer, I noticed a transgender woman at my parents' church. I was sure she wouldn't last long there. Yet each time I returned for holidays or a summer visit, there she was, increasingly part of the center of that faith community. I had been wrong. There was much more at play among those people that I had been willing to acknowledge. This really was a community of faith and goodwill, just like FirstU Ottawa is. And now here, I need to pause. I'm talking today about the work of the church, of this congregation, this faith community. During my years as a minister, I found that there are times when it is helpful, if not necessary, to address this topic from the pulpit. I remember doing just that during my first sermon to you from Worship Hall. After that service, I remember one of our board of directors rightly relaying a conversation they had to me with a first-time visitor during the coffee hour. As that board member recounted to me, they counted, Reverend Eric, the number of times you used the word church or congregation. It was upwards of 17, they said. Frankly, that number seemed low to me. The point was that for that visitor, the words church and congregation were trigger words. Inadvertently, I had rubbed salt on old wounds. Since then, I've tried to use the phrase faith community more than either of the words church or congregation. And yet, while I know this is a risk, I know this will bring some degree of salt on a wound, I'm still going to use those terms, congregation and church, in addition to the term faith community, because this group, this institution is all three. Of course, I will always listen to anyone's story about how any term has become triggering for them, especially in a religious or faith context. At the same time, we have to be willing to let some fights go so that we can engage in the more pressing challenges facing us. There are times when all of us, myself included, need to simply get over X, Y, or Z so that we are not holding anyone else hostage to our earned and learned baggage. Now, before I close, I want to return to the poem that Kate shared with us earlier. In fact, what Kate read was not the whole of Marge Piercy's poem, The Low Road, only the second half. While I've used the poem before in worship, I've never shared the whole poem. The beginning half, the first half, is frankly stark. And while Kate is certainly strong and competent, the poem's beginning is not something I feel like I can ask anyone else to offer. The events this week in Eastern Europe, the invasion of Ukraine, make sharing the fullness of the poet's message necessary to take to heart. In the days and weeks to come, let's take inspiration from all those in Ukraine and elsewhere around the globe who are fighting so hard for democracy, for their voices to be heard, for representative forms of government. I expect we will be witness to a masterclass in resistance from the streets of Kiev and elsewhere throughout Ukraine in the days to come. Furthermore, I encourage you to join me in contributing toward the Canadian Red Cross Ukrainian Humanitarian Crisis Appeal, either directly or through FirstU. Of course, there are other groups funding resources to the people in Ukraine, whatever makes sense to you. Returning to the poem, the second half, which Kate shared with us earlier, it could be argued that Vladimir Putin's goal is also each day we mean one more. But let's be clear, in the we in his case, his we, Putin's we, really means that trinity of me, myself, and I. He really isn't talking about we at all. Here is Marge Piercy's poem, The Low Road, in its entirety. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, bust you. They can break your fingers, burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take away your children, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them doing. How can you fight them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take whatever revenge you can, but they roll right over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing fire can break a cordon. Termites can bring down a mansion. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, You can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinners with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen makes a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000, you have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000, power and your own newspaper. 100,000, your own media. 10 million, your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. That, my friends, is our work. To be part of an expanding sense of we. To each day mean one more. To be a beacon of an inviting and welcoming faith community, willing to learn from our neighbors as well as offer others our well-earned wisdom. How else can we become a working beacon once more than by expanding our vision and our reach? Each day saying we, knowing who we mean, and each day meaning one more. May it be so. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. The piece I'm going to be playing for you today as an anthem is called Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me. The music's composed by Duke Ellington. One of the reasons I've chosen this piece for this Sunday is because this is the last Sunday of Black History Month, and Duke Ellington was one of the great African-American musicians, and I think also one of the greatest composers of any genre of music during the 20th century. This piece, or this melody by Duke Ellington, was originally written in around 1940 as part of a piece known as Concerto for Cootie. And Cootie was a reference to Cootie Williams, one of the great trumpet players of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. A few years later, lyrics were written for it, and that's when it got the name Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me and became extremely popular ever since. And I recommend going to YouTube and looking for recordings of this piece. There's some really good ones out there, including classic recordings with Ella Fitzgerald singing the vocals, for example. And I say that partly because you're not going to hear much of the melody in what I'm playing, because I'm playing a trumpet part from a jazz band arrangement. So it's a little bit of series of trumpet solos. But I think it portrays really nicely the feel of the piece.
Thank you very much, Maury. Now our invitation to our offering. As you may know, we have not been collecting Sunday service offerings for almost 2 years. Yet during the continuing pandemic, we rely on your generosity as much as ever. Wherever and whenever you are watching this, you are invited to go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how to make a donation or keep up with your pledge. And as Reverend Eric said earlier, if you'd like to contribute to the Canadian Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal through FirstU, simply note that in any donation you make to First Unitarian Ottawa. We'll pass your generosity on. Our gifts are freely given and gratefully received. We dedicate these gifts to the work of this community of faith, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another. And now our closing hymn, Building a New Way. Over to you, Jen.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Thank you, Jen. You picked a perfect hymn for closing hymn for us. What I didn't tell you when you made that suggestion is that the last time I was in Transylvania was leading a youth delegation, a pilgrimage to my then congregation's partner church village in Bulan, Romania. And our youth sang that song as part of a worship service on our last day in the village. So means a lot. Thank you. Before we begin to close this time of worship and reflection, a reminder that our online hospitality hour will begin at 11:30. Between now and then, you may want to take a screen break or watch the music videos we'll host before hospitality hour begins. The choice is yours. I want to offer a brief introduction to the words with which I'll extinguish our chalice this morning. They're from the supervising minister of my parish internship back in 94 and 95, the late Reverend Dan O'Neill. This was the benediction he offered each week he preached. Dan uses the verb minister, to serve, throughout it. Now, some of you may have noticed that in the last couple of weeks, I've introduced myself as your lead pastor instead of minister. Simply put, I'm simply trying that term on for size. The title minister means different things in different faith traditions. And here in Canada, where our elected representatives are ministers, I thought I'd see how a little more differentiation might work. I learned more from Dan than from anyone else about how to care for and help lead a community of faith. During my year working with him, he was diagnosed with the cancer that would, 2 years later, claim his life. Enough preamble. As we prepare to extinguish our chalice and move toward the conclusion of this time of worship and inspiration, let these words by the Reverend Dan O'Neill be our guide. There is so much to know, so much to love, so much to share. Let us go forth this day and minister. There are forsaken elements in each of us, abandoned dreams, neglected fears, breast closet skeletons, tremendous possibilities as yet untapped. Let us minister to ourselves. There are broken relationships among the people, friends we need to touch, partners we need to love, enemies we need to forgive. Let us minister to each other. There is sorrow in the land, war, pollution, injustice, a tragic squandering of immense wealth. Let us minister to our world. And there is a forgotten cry within us all, a deafening silence, largely unheeded, but ever beckoning. Home, 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 it calls. An explosion of joy, waiting to be born. Let us minister to our source. There is so much to know, so much to love, so much to share. Let us go forth this day and minister. This morning's chalice is extinguished, but our connections and our faith remain. With that said, Jen, will you please bless us again?
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Cool dans mes mains, vie d'espoir et de justice. Donne-lui-moi, ciel, emporte-moi, source de vie. Viens vers moi, viens vers moi.
In the Jewish tradition, at the close of the Passover Seder, the last line spoken are next year in Jerusalem. Well, next week we'll be back in Worship Hall and streaming. So let us, as we can now, reach out as best we can to one another. Let us reach out our hands to one another. We are still a community of living, growing hearts and faith. My friends, go in peace, go in love, go in joy, practicing the art of expanding the care and vision of our community of faith, so that it is more likely that someday all may be well. But don't go far. Again, our hospitality hour will begin at 11:30. And now, our postlude for the morning.